Welcome back to MMA Al Dente. I am the guy who picked John Jones to defeat Stipe Miocic. That's right, I got that one correct. I had Jones winning by spinning back kick to the body, but in round two. He did get it done in round three, which, whatever. Still a great call on my part. And my point is, I'm coming to you here today not feeling like a total fucking dumbass idiot. That's someone else. I'm not the stupidest fuck in the MMA community. That's not me. This is me, though. And apparently, I've decided to start dressing like a Hollywood cocksucker. So that's what I've got going on. And I'm here to break down UFC 310. Again, I picked Jones to beat Stipe, so you might want to fucking listen to me here. I might have some good analysis here for you. Check it out. All right. Okay, opening up UFC 310, we have Kennedy and Nzechukwu taking on Lucas Bzreski, whom I will be calling Dresky. And right away, you know where I'm going here. When I get going with the leaning and the hands and the horse shit, I'm picking Kennedy and Nzechukwu to win, but I'm betting on Lucas Bzreski, even though I have no faith in him whatsoever. And there's a little bit of faith. He did come through for me against Walter Walker. But here, the bet is not based on the faith I have in Dresky. It's based on the doubt that I have in Kennedy. Kennedy's a guy with a much greater upside than Lucas Dresky. I think he's a better fighter altogether, definitely. And he's certainly got a much brighter future in the UFC. But he still hasn't erased all of those doubts of mine. He's a guy who's been TKO'd twice. Now, I don't think Dresky's the most likely candidate to TKO him here. Kennedy Nzechukwu, even though he's been TKO'd twice, he has moved up in weight, which theoretically should only help his chin. And of course, the two guys that knock him out in the first place, despite being down at light heavyweight, they're better strikers and probably more dangerous and powerful punch for punch than Lucas Dresky is at heavyweight. Still, though, there's doubt because he's been TKO'd twice, and he might have a button right over here where if you hit it, he gets wobbly, and he's more susceptible to the TKO. And at heavyweight, there's not a fighter who couldn't capitalize on that. So, a little bit of something there. But also, Kennedy Nzechukwu is the same guy who way back in 2024, I believe, earlier this year, lost a decision to the ghost of Ovince St. Preux, who's in his late 50s or early 60s. I wouldn't say Ovince out-hustled him, but he did outpoint him. And I thought Kennedy really should have been out-hustling Ovince St. Preux. So yeah, he's not the perfect fighter, and I don't think he should be a 6-1 favorite over anybody in the UFC. And I'd bet against him every time, even if he's fighting fucking Angela Hill. I'll bet against him. And I have already bet against him here. I bet on Lucas Dresky. But again, I don't have too much faith. Kennedy Nzechukwu's got many wins that are better than Lucas Dresky's best win. Even though Lucas Dresky should have beaten Martin Buday, in my opinion, which would have been his best win. But still, here, he's not fighting a zombie like Walter Walker or even Martin Buday, who's a better zombie. But Kennedy Nzechukwu is a light heavyweight. Coming up to heavyweight here, he's going to be more mobile on his feet, definitely more agile fighter, and I think he's a better striker to begin with than Lucas Dresky. So my official prediction will be Kennedy Nzechukwu wins by knockout in round two. Kennedy, most of his wins, most of his finishes come down the stretch. I think the majority are in round two. And even though I don't think he's got the concussive punching power like the heavyweights that have knocked out Lucas Dresky throughout his career, he's got one loss way back when, and then the two in the UFC to Waldo Cortez Acosta and Mick Parkin. And I don't think Kennedy and Setchiku can match their punching power, these guys. But he's still got a lot of weapons, and he typically gets more dangerous down the stretch. And I think he's going to be too much for Lucas Bzreski. Although, again, I'm betting on Bzreski. Next up, we have Chase Hooper versus Clay Guida in another one of these. That's right. I'm picking Chase Hooper to win. I've got him winning by submission. And hell, I'll go with him winning by calf slicer because I'm feeling bold. Having said that, it's not going to be worth it to bet on Chase. Probably not anyway. He's a 12-1 favorite right now, which is fucking crazy. And trying to shave those odds down with the props, I don't think will be worth it. Although I have to wait till I see the props and even the over-under because sometimes they drop the ball on that. But yeah, I think this is one where I'm staying away from it altogether, which is just another way of me saying that I'm betting on Clay Guida. Clay Guida is a plus 650, which is fucking crazy. And I feel like that warrants $1.50 bet on my part. Maybe $2. I have to see. But it's based on the fact that Clay has 60 plus fights experience. He's still a viable grinder at 40 fuck years old. And Chase Hooper is limited, much like Clay, but still, Chase is limited. It's not like he's the most well-rounded guy. He's still developing, both technically and probably physically, fight by fight. But yeah, there's a little room for me to waste some money on Clay Guida, and that's what I'm doing. My heart isn't into it, though. I do think he's going to run into a lot of trouble with Chase. I think Chase is leagues better than him on the ground. These two guys did have a grappling match 2 years ago where Chase won by calf slicer. In case you didn't know that, I was fucking joking before. I don't think he's going to win by calf slicer here, but it's certainly possible. But I do think he's way better than Clay on the ground. I think if he gets in control, Clay is fucked. And even if he doesn't get in control and Clay is on top of him trying to stuff his guard, I still think he's in big trouble. And I think if these guys are grappling in any position, Clay is going to be getting submitted. So that is the prediction. I think Chase is able to force this into a grappling match and submit him. In their grappling match, Chase wasn't able to go through his wrestling. And of course, Clay still maintains that advantage. But Chase, I think, is going to be fearless on the feet. First of all, his striking is only coming along. We saw him knock down Slava Claus in his last fight, showing some wrinkles of power there, which is nice. But also, he's shown in the past, the fight before that or whatever, 2 fights against Nick Fiore, against Justin Levitt. He can bring the fight to you on the feet because it just makes it more likely that you're going to be grappling. So if you don't have that firepower like Steve Garcia to threaten Chase Hooper and Clay Guida does not, I think Chase is going to be able to strike his way into a grappling match pretty quickly. And I mean grappling match, I mean them being initiated in a clinch for grappling because Chase doesn't need to be able to hit a double leg to start grappling with Clay Guida. It's just tying their bodies up, pulling them down with a guillotine jumping guard, lacing up a leg or whatever. I think once their bodies are entangled, Chase Hooper is going to be threatening Clay Guida with submissions. And that's the fight I envision. I envision Clay probably trying to sprawl and brawl and maintain his more athletic and agile advantage on the feet. But I think Chase is going to be chasing him down with the height and the reach and the activity. And eventually he's going to force a tie up and they're going to be grappling and he's going to get Clay out of there. Clay is still submittable. That's something that's never left him. He's never quite patched up that hole. He's still a guy who is submittable. And even though he's done well against plenty of great submission artists, better submission artists like Leonardo Santos, Chase Hooper is 25 years old. He's incredibly dangerous on the ground. He's not somebody who's going to wilt like Leonardo Santos and fatigue down the stretch and whatever. And I think he's just going to find the way to tap out Clay Guida sooner than later. Of course, if he doesn't get it sooner, he can get it later, which he's shown in the past against Peter Barrett. And that's the thing. Look at the fights Chase Hooper's lost or come close to losing. That Peter Barrett fight, he was close to losing. The Steve Garcia fight. I'm sorry, the Steven Peterson fight. He also lost to Steve Garcia. But this is a fight where I would have been much more heavily betting on Clay Guida just a few years ago. But those few years mean a lot more to Chase Hooper than they do to Clay Guida. Chase was 21 or whatever, 22 when he was fighting Peter Barrett and Steven Peterson. Now he's 25. He's a bona fide man. He's starting to fucking hurt people on the feet like a man. And I think he's going to be too much for Clay Guida. Yeah, not really betting a lot on this at all. Just wasting some pennies on Clay Guida. I'll wait to see if something opens up for my pick, which is Chase Hooper winning by submission. But make no mistake, that is the pick. Chase Hooper wins by submission. And I'll go with what I say before, the fucking Texas Cloverleaf. He wins by Texas Cloverleaf in round 1. Next up, we have Michael Chiesa versus Max Griffin. My prediction for this fight is Michael Chiesa wins, and I've got him winning by decision. I think this is a close matchup between a guy who's got a distinct striking advantage and a guy who's got a distinct grappling advantage. And of course, that means it's going to come down to who has that wrestling advantage. And I give that to Chiesa, albeit slightly. I do think he's going to need more than one takedown to win this fight, just because of who he's fighting. I think he's going to need to dig deep and hit those takedowns and really grind on Griffin. But of course, Michael Chiesa is so dangerous on top that it wouldn't totally surprise me if he was the first guy to submit Max Griffin. If Chiesa's on top of anybody, they're in the realm of getting finished. Just ask Beneil Dariush. But Griffin has never been finished, not with a submission anyway. And the only guy to ever TKO him was Colby Covington. And he did so in like the 15th minute of the fight. Really drowned Max Griffin. And while Michael Chiesa can certainly drown people, and he's way better on the ground than Colby Covington, way better. He still doesn't have that pace and that pressure of Colby. So I don't know if he could exactly duplicate that performance. But either way, that's the only time Max has ever been finished, and he definitely could have made it to the final bell in that fight. But since then, he's been fighting against the Michael Moraleses of the world and the Jeremiah Wellses and whoever, and he's still standing tall at 39 now. So I still trust his durability, and I mean that in an MMA sense, where I think Chiesa's his primary path to victory is a decision. Max Griffin's pretty good at stopping takedowns in the first place, but even if you do take him down, he's good at keeping you from advancing to phase 2 on him. So I think Chiesa is going to need to take down Griffin multiple times, or at the very least clinch up with him, where he's the much stronger man, I think, on the inside, even though he's the former lightweight and whatever. He's still a gorilla, even at welterweight. And I do think Chiesa wins that control battle, if not the wrestling battle. And of course, if he should get it there, he's definitely winning the jiu-jitsu battle against Max Griffin. But he's going to need to dig deep, Michael Chiesa. Chiesa, luckily for him, he's never been knocked out either. He seems like a pretty damn healthy fighter, even though he's about to turn 37 in a few days. He's only been TKO'd technically once, and it was a cut stoppage, a doctor stoppage due to a cut against Joe Lozon in a fight that he was winning, by the way, but whatever. But yeah, he's still healthy in that regard. His main liability is that he's been submitted 5 times. It's his submission defense. Of course, he's a fucking monster on the ground, but he has been submitted 5 times. Max Griffin's only got 2 subs, so I doubt he's going to be lacing up a Darce choke on Michael Chiesa. Of course, I'm going to bet on it because I'm a degenerate. I'll put some pennies behind that. But yeah, I think Michael Chiesa being the first guy to submit Max Griffin is way more likely than Max being the 6th guy to submit Michael Chiesa. And yeah, I think this is likely to be a decision. I think if either guy won, I'd envision decision being his path to victory there. And I'd give a slight edge to Chiesa here because I think he's going to be winning that wrestling battle, if not just that physicality battle in the clinch. So yeah, slight edge to Michael Chiesa. I have to say, I mentioned this when he fought before he fought Tony Ferguson the last time. I didn't like the way he looked against Kevin Holland. I never want to say some guy quit or whatever the fuck. I'm just some pussy in a bathrobe. But I've heard him acknowledge that he kind of checked out or whatever. He didn't like his performance. And look, Kevin Holland is much more dangerous in a lot of different ways than Max Griffin. But yeah, I think this is going to be a fight where Michael Chiesa is going to need grit to win because it's going 15 minutes, unless he can just control Max Griffin from bell to bell, which Chiesa has done in the past. But either way, I'm leaning towards Chiesa here. I bet on him. I'll wait for the props, but again, it's tough to trust any specific prop with Chiesa. You know, I think decision is more likely, but his danger alone scares me from committing to that. So yeah, a small bet on Michael Chiesa is how I played this one, and I'll wait to see if there's another way to go. Of course, the over/under has my interest as well. Both guys have solid chins, and I'll be playing the over if they make a mistake there. But yeah, I'm going with Chiesa via control, and we'll see what fucking happens. Next up, we have Cody Durden versus Joshua Van. My prediction for this fight is Cody Durden wins by decision. I think Joshua Van is an excellent young fighter with a lot of excellent traits. Youth being one of them. He just turned 23 recently. But I still think all of that can be shut down by superior wrestling. And that's what Cody Durden brings. I think he's the best wrestler that Joshua Van has fought in the UFC. And it's just going to be a different type of matchup. Where if Joshua Van is doing his thing, which he comes alive, usually after a shitty round one, and then he comes alive in rounds 2 and 3, mostly on the feet, I think a lot of that can be neutralized with some good old-fashioned wrestling. And we've seen Cody Durden be that relentless wrestler, hitting a dozen takedowns or whatever, and working hard for 15 minutes. And I just think it's a different type of matchup. So I'm picking Cody Durden to win. Having said that, Cody Durden's got a lot of vulnerabilities as well. He's got 6 losses, and he's been finished in 5 of them. He was submitted 4 times and knocked out for the first time recently against Bruno Silva, although he's been clipped before as well against Muhammad Makayev. But yeah, he's definitely a vulnerable guy. Mostly he's susceptible to being submitted, and they're all to good fighters because that's what happens when you kick enough ass. And he's been in there with better opposition, and it's given him more losses. I don't think Joshua Van has the submission skills to capitalize on a weak submission defense of Cody Durden. Van's got 2 submissions. One of them is a nice funky calf slicer when he had more options, but he went with the calf slicer, which I've always said speaks to something going on. There's more than meets the eye grappling wise with him, but I don't think there's enough that even doesn't meet the eye to catch Cody Durden in a sub, and certainly not positionally dominate him in whatever. So I think this could prove to be a bad matchup, and I think it will with Cody Durden. Of course, he's got to not get clipped either. Again, I mentioned he was been knocked out once against Bruno Silva. Muhammad Makayev only guillotined him because he clipped him. And Joshua Van's got some good pop in his punches. And again, he just accelerates as the fight goes on. So Cody's got to make sure he doesn't get tired and let Joshua Van turn this into a striking bout where he's in his face like a Diaz. But Joshua Van's been defeated twice as well. He was knocked unconscious last year, I believe, against Charles Johnson in round 3. That's the one UFC fight where he got off to a nice early start and was winning rounds 1 and 2. And then Charles Johnson was forced to put his foot on the gas, and he went for it, and he knocked Joshua Van unconscious. Definitely not the greatest look being knocked unconscious, but he's still only 23 years old. He was 22 at the time, probably. So I'm sure he's healthy. And unless he gets clipped again, I'm not going to consider it a major thing. Although, again, Cody Durden's got some good hands and underrated pop in his punches, so it might be a thing. His other loss, though, was more indicative of how I see him losing this fight, Joshua Van, and that was a loss to Devon Jackson, this guy who I believe is a wrestler, certainly looked like it, and he was able to toss around Joshua Van. Picked him up, slammed him down, was working him on the ground, threatening him with arm bars, and in the end, he forced him to submit at the end of round 2 with a rear naked choke. Even though it was only 3 years ago, Joshua Van only had a few fights. He's still only got a few fights, whatever he's at now. My point is, he's made a lot of strides and improvements since then, I'm sure, and he's a different fighter. So I can't say Cody Durden won't submit him. Look what he did to Matt Schnell recently. But I would favor Cody Durden to win by decision and wrestling to really be the story of the victory. And Cody, he's shown in the UFC against the likes of Charles Johnson and whoever else that he can fight that type of fight. Jake Hadley and Cody Durden. And that's the other thing, too. I talk about Cody Durden being susceptible to getting finished. He's really tough. He really wants to win, and he will. I think he's got a lot of grit, a lot more grit than somebody who's got 5 losses and 5 finish losses and 6 losses would have or should have. But I think Cody Durden will be the superior grappler. And if he's able to keep himself from getting rocked, I think he's going to win this fight, and he's going to do so with superior wrestling. So Cody Durden is the pick. I've bet on him, but I'll wait for the props because I didn't bet anything serious. And we'll see what fucking happens. Next up, we have a fight that I broke down a few weeks ago. Chris Weidman versus Eric Anders. I'm going to do it again here, but I'll make it pithy. My prediction for this fight is Chris Weidman wins, and I've got him winning by decision. And the basis for the prediction is that I would love to see Chris Weidman win. Just taking you through my thought process. That's where it's at. Clearly, I don't plan on betting on this fight until the props drop, and I'll be wasting money in every direction. But yeah, in general, this is a toss-up. Completely even their odds. So if you have an inclination one way or another, you bet on it. And for me, I'll pick Chris Weidman, but I'm staying away from this altogether. I always would have picked Chris Weidman to win if these guys fought way back when they had 2 legs and a prime. I always would have picked Chris Weidman to win. I think he's a step ahead on the feet and on the ground, even though Eric Anders is solid everywhere. But I still think this fight here, then there's not going to be any grappling now that they're both in their late 40s. I think this will be a stand-up fight, and I still slightly favor Chris Weidman there. He's got the major liability between the two in his chin. He's been knocked out a bunch, and assuming his leg stays intact, that's the one thing he's got to worry about. And that does make Eric Anders' left hand the best weapon in this matchup. Eric Anders has always had a mean left hand, although Chris Weidman's lead left hook was always fucking nice in his prime. But here, the danger lies in Eric Anders' left hand, and I think if Chris Weidman's able to keep himself safe from that and from any big moments, he outpoints Eric Anders. I like the way he looked against Bruno Silva. Excuse me. I know he ended up finishing him with the Three Stooges special, and it kind of took away from the victory. But I thought Weidman looked good there. Really good, compared to how I expected him to look. I thought he was going to get knocked out, but he was leading the dance. And here I've got him leading the dance against Eric Anders. I think he's going to have to keep that left hand away from him. And even though I think Weidman is overall the better grappler, Eric Anders is still a black belt. And he's a fucking tank and probably in better physical condition with the legs and whatever. So I do think Eric Anders could hold him and bully him in a neutralizing clinch position, that sort of thing. But at range, which is where the majority of this fight will take place, I do think Chris Weidman, even with half a leg and whatever, he's still the better striker than Eric Anders. I think he's going to be leading that dance, putting that straight right down the middle, and outpointing Eric Anders for a decision. My heart's not into this one at all. Again, it's not like I'm waiting for the decision prop to drop. When I say I'm waiting for the props to drop, it's so I can put a few pennies on Eric Anders via knockout. But even that remains to be seen what the odds say and whatever. This is a razor thin fight as far as the money line goes. So I might just stay away from this one altogether without even wasting pennies. But yeah, with no pennies on the line, you asked me my prediction. I've got Chris Weidman winning. I've got him winning by decision. But again, bear in mind the basis for the prediction is it would make me happy. You make me happy. All right. Next up, we have Bryan Battle versus Randy Brown. My prediction for this fight is Randy Brown wins, and I've got him winning by decision. I think Battle has looked incredible in the UFC so far, and I don't think Randy has it in him to duplicate the success of Rinat Fakhretdinov, the one guy who beat Battle in the UFC. But I still think Randy brings a unique challenge on the feet that Battle has not faced yet in the octagon. Bryan Battle has really come into his own as a striker since making it to the UFC. And his power is showing up as well. He's gotten some nice knockouts, quick knockouts. And, of course, got a beautiful stoppage in his last one in round 2 against Kevin Jousset. But I think Randy Brown is the exact opposite type of fighter, especially from like a Kevin Jousset. Randy Brown is not the plodding forward type. He's also lacking in power, which comes along with that type of style, but he moves really well on his back foot, Randy, and strikes on his back foot, and he can fight like that for 15 minutes. Randy Brown, I think, will be harder to hit than all these guys. Bryan Battle has put up better numbers than Randy Brown as far as his striking output, but I don't think his output is going to be there for him against a guy like Randy. And I think Randy will be dictating things from the outside with Bryan stalking him and trying to corner Randy, either to tee off on him against the cage like Jack Della Maddalena, the last guy to finish him, who actually submitted him, or just to take him down, which I would think would be plan A with a Bryan Battle. Bryan Battle is the better grappler between these two. Randy Brown's underrated as a grappler, but Bryan Battle's better. He's a nifty submission artist, and he's a nifty round 2 submission artist. He wears you down, and then down the stretch, after you've been carrying his weight and he sucks some of the life out of you, he puts you away. And he's done so against some high-level fighters, going back to the Ultimate Fighter and into the UFC, Bryan Battle. But I think Randy is going to be able to, first of all, keep this fight standing. And the first level of takedown defense is his movement. But I also think he'll be able to shuck Bryan off of him if Bryan closes the distance. And on the outside, while I think Randy is still in a very close fight, I do give him a slight advantage over Bryan Battle. I just wish he had a little more firepower to beat up Bryan and slow him down a little bit. But I think even if Bryan doesn't slow down, Randy can still work hard for 15 minutes, and I envision him narrowly outworking Bryan Battle. Randy's been finished 4 times in his 5 losses. He was submitted twice. This guy, Michael Graves, who was really underrated and kind of got shit canned for some domestic shit or whatever. But he was his first loss in the UFC. Michael Graves got him out of there with a rear naked choke in round 2. And then his other submission loss, he was knocked half dead by Jack Della Maddalena and then strangled in round 1. Speaking of which, he's been knocked out twice. In addition to getting clipped by Maddalena, or Della Maddalena. He was knocked out by Vicente Luque, who was fighting on this card, and Nico Price, who got him with some funky fucking upside down hammer fist shit. But no matter how it happened, he was knocked out. He's been knocked out twice, and Vicente Luque especially is very fucking dangerous, which I'll be talking about in a few minutes. But yeah, Randy Brown at age 34, the chin is still an issue moving forward. And it may not have been that big of an issue before Bryan Battle started knocking guys out in the UFC. But now it's definitely more of a concern. Still, though, I'd like to think he's safe from the knockout of Bryan Battle. I don't think Bryan Battle's as dangerous as those guys. Certainly not as funky as Nico there. And Randy Brown's looked pretty damn healthy. since that last finish loss. Brian Battle, he lost to Rinat Fakhretdinov, who took him down and also dropped him in round 3, but mainly took him down for 15 minutes. That's not a path to victory for Randy. And he also lost by armbar way back when in 2019 or whatever to this guy, Nicholas Martino, I think. But that was in a minute or whatever. Probably not a path to victory for Randy either. I know Randy's underrated on the ground, but again, he's outgunned here in this matchup. Battle has been knocked out. It was in his first amateur fight ever, and it was against a heavyweight who got him out of there with a head kick. So it's forgivable on many levels, and there's no reason to doubt the chin of Brian Battle. And even if there was, Randy's not exactly the top candidate to knock him out. Although he did knock out Muslim Salikov last year, which was a pleasant surprise. But yeah, I do think this will be a fight that is mostly contested on the feet. And even there, I think Brian Battle's very much in the fight. He's already got half a point on the judges' scorecard just for the pressure that I know he's going to be bringing. Whereas Randy's Mr. Backfoot. But I do think Randy moves well, where he's going to stop Brian from putting up the numbers he's put up against these slower plotting types and wrestlers and whatever. And I think Randy on the outside can bust Brian up. Keep him at bay maybe with some of those oblique kicks and whatever. And he's got to watch out for the power as well. But I do think Randy can move better and touch him up from the outside. That's the prediction. I've got Randy Brown winning by decision. I have bet on Randy Brown. I bet on him at plus 190, but I'll wait for the props. Next up, we have Movsar Evloev versus Aljamain Sterling. My prediction for this fight is Movsar Evloev wins. And I'll go with him winning by decision. Imagine that. And the basis for the prediction is wrestling. Imagine that. I think Movsar is going to have superior wrestling, and that should theoretically remove a whole world of offense from Aljamain Sterling. Aljo is a monster grappler. He is the better grappler, better submission grappler between the two. But a lot of that is based off of top position. And I think, again, if he takes away that wrestling, it's not to say Aljo can't make shit work for him off of his back. And certainly in transitions, Aljo is very dangerous, and Movsar's got to mind his P's and Q's. But I think if he wins the wrestling battle, he wins the fight. Aljo's crafty and whatever, but he's not as dynamic as a guy like Diego Lopez, who was still shut down by Movsar Evloev anyway. But yeah, Movsar, he's 18-0. He's never been beaten, let alone finished. There's no real known weaknesses of him. We've seen him drop rounds. We've seen him get taken down. Mike Grundy, mainly, is the guy who took him down. But he's been taken down in a few other fights. He always tends to battle back and win the wrestling battle. But even in the one time where he was facing a superior wrestler, he still had more going on where he won the fight. And here, I think Aljamain Sterling needs to get on top of him to win. I think on the feet, Movsar is going to be better. I don't know for sure, but I do think Movsar's got more going on the feet. And on the ground, like I said, Aljamain is way better, but not off of his back. And with the way I've seen Movsar survive throughout his 18 fights and whatever, 10 UFC fights or whatever he's got, every one of them being a decision, I think he'll be able to outlast and outposition Aljamain Sterling for a victory. So Movsar is the pick. I've got him winning by decision, and I will wait for the props before I decide to bet on this, which I might not. But I'm going to throw a penny or two on Aljamain Sterling winning by submission as well, because I think that's primarily his path to victory. Whether he wins the wrestling battle or not, I would think that's how he gets it done. But not a lot of faith in that. Again, the pick is Movsar via decision, and that's what I'll be looking to bet more than a few pennies on. Next up, we have Themba Gorimbo versus Vicente Luque. And I'm picking against Themba Gorimbo yet again. I don't think I've ever picked him to win since he's been in the UFC. But yeah, I am picking Luque. I've got Luque winning by submission. We'll go with a Darce choke, because why not? But Luque, I still have a lot of doubts about after the way he's looked lately. He was knocked out a few years ago by Jeff Neal. really took a beating and ended up getting finished in round 3. And after that fight, they found his brain was bleeding. He had a brain hemorrhage. And I don't know the details, but I know it was a health scare. And I think it did put some fear into him. Because after that, we've seen Luque fight twice. He did win against RDA, and he out wrestled him, which was a good look, but still uncharacteristic of Luque. And then he got knocked out by Buckley or TKO'd. And that really wasn't such a good look. I mean, Buckley's incredibly dangerous, but I don't know what happened with Luque there. There was no visible moment where he was hit and hurt. I'm sure everything hurt in one way or another, but it seemed like he kind of mentally wilted there and pulled guard and kind of shelled up until the ref stopped the fight. I don't know. It just seems like he's got a lot of doubt in himself and his own health. Of course, again, I'm a pussy in a bathrobe sitting here talking to you through a fucking computer. I'm never going to step in there, and here I am talking about guys wilting. But it's what I saw. It was definitely different from the other Vicente Luque losses, and different from most TKO losses altogether. But still, Temba Gorimbo does not have that firepower of Joaquin Buckley or Jeff Neal. He's only got 2 TKO victories, I believe, in his career. He shouldn't be going through Vicente Luque, and he certainly shouldn't be putting any fear into Vicente Luque, unless he really is compromised. So I think Vicente Luque is safe on that front. I think he's safe to be himself, and when he's himself, he's very fucking dangerous. That hasn't gone anywhere. Vicente Luque is still a guy with some potent offense and an incredible finishing ability. And I think here, if he has a moment with Temba Gorimbo, where Temba is hurt at all and Vicente Luque smells blood, I think he's going to close the show. Probably do it with a submission. Temba, he's got some vulnerability issues, which I mention every time I break him down. He's been knocked out once. This guy, Dave Mazzani, knocked him out in round 2 a few years ago. He was also submitted twice. He was submitted against, what the hell's his name? AJ Fletcher, who actually knocked him into a guillotine with an elbow. So half a strike against his chin there, although not really. And then he was also guillotined by Leon Mirnhard, the guy who beat Don Madge 3 times, in case you were interested. But yeah, he's definitely shown vulnerabilities even into his UFC career, and Vicente Luque is still incredibly dangerous. And I said a lot of this same shit when Temba Gorimbo fought Nico Price, because Nico Price is incredibly dangerous. But Luque is the guy that beat Price twice, and he's definitely a level above in terms of finishing ability. And I also think he's sharper athletically and hasn't lost as big of a step as Nico Price did. So yeah, I've got Vicente Luque not having any major issues that compromise him internally, and I think externally he's going to be maybe not leading the dance, but he's going to clip Temba Gorimbo and then get the ball rolling with some sort of deadly offense. Luque still hits really fucking hard. He still looked really sharp against Buckley in his last fight up until the collapse. And I also think Temba Gorimbo can't go just trying to straight up out wrestle Vicente Luque. Luque is too dangerous with every choke in the series, where Temba Gorimbo is going to run into a lot of trouble if he gets lazy with Vicente Luque. So I'm picking Luque to win. Luque's had a lot of ups and downs, but against a better level of opposition for sure. Temba Gorimbo, he's beaten some good guys, but everybody he's lost to is worse than Vicente Luque. And I've got Vicente Luque returning to form here, being able to be himself and clipping Temba and putting him away with a fucking anaconda or a Darce choke or whatever I said. Luque is the pick. I've bet on Luque, but not with my heart because, he's, again, I've got some doubts in him. But yeah, I'm taking Luque. Next up, we have Anthony Smith versus Dominic Reyes. My prediction for this fight is Dominic Reyes wins by decision. I think that's by far the most likely outcome for this fight. And I'll try to find some way to bet on that maybe. But I know I will be wasting a few quarters on Anthony Smith winning by knockout, because that's his only path to victory, or his primary path anyway. And he's also a 3-1 underdog to begin with. So yeah, I'll be looking for that. But Dominic Reyes, I think, should win this fight, and I think it should be pretty comfortable for him. I think Dominic Reyes, he does have to worry about his chin. It is a major liability, and Anthony Smith is still a 6'4" man, 205-pound man. But Smith hasn't knocked anybody unconscious since Rashad Evans or Shogun Rua, whoever the last guy is that he beat there. But it's been years. He hasn't really concussed anybody. And Reyes, I think, is going to be tough to catch in the first place. I think he moves better than Anthony Smith. I think he's the superior athlete. I don't know about the shape of his chin, but I think his knees are in better shape. And I also think he throws faster strikes and also more powerful strikes than Anthony Smith. And on the outside, if he can be chopping at those legs and stifling the movement of Anthony Smith, I think Smith will never catch him. And it'll be Dominic Reyes taking the fight to Anthony Smith for the 15 minutes. Smith's been finished a bunch, knocked out and submitted. I'm counting on him losing a decision here. I'm picking him to lose a decision because he's one of those guys like Andrei Arlovsky, who just got finished so much where he kind of settled into a decision fighter as far as his losses go, and he knows how to protect himself. And also he's worrying about light heavyweight speed instead of welterweight and middleweight speed, which is where the majority of his finish losses take place. But still, he's going to be at a speed disadvantage here. Even if Dominic Reyes isn't as fast as fucking Josh Neer or whatever, Reyes is still a big, fast, light heavyweight, and I do think it's going to be too much for Anthony Smith. I've got Smith surviving, but I don't think he's going to be in this fight too much. And I don't think he's going to be able to wrangle Dominic Reyes and take the fight to the ground. I don't think Reyes is going to make too many dumb mistakes, getting his neck caught like Vitor Petrino or trapped in a triangle like Devin Clark. And I think Anthony Smith is going to be a step behind, and then in the end, maybe even getting ragdolled and kind of running out of options. And we saw him fight a very disappointing fight against Roman Dolidze recently, and I could see this one going that way, only on the feet, kind of. So I guess like his Johnny Walker fight, pretty much. But yeah, anyway, I've got Dominic Reyes winning, and it's not just because he won me over with that knockout over Dustin Jacoby. I still have a lot of doubt in Dominic Reyes, but there's still a good amount of faith in him as well. And of course, I did recently watch his fight with John Jones again. So there's that. But yeah, I'm going with Dominic Reyes. I've got him winning by decision. No bet as of yet. And like everything else, I'll wait for the props. Opening up the main card, we have Doo-Ho Choi, the Korean Superboy, taking on Nate the Train Landwehr. And in case you guys didn't know, Nate the Train in the UFC, baby. That's right. I am picking Nate the Train here. I'm picking him to win, and I'll go with him winning by round 3 TKO. Because that sure sounds like a fun fight. But I do think, regardless of how he wins, whether it's by decision or knockout, or even a submission, as he's gotten his only 2 submissions in his UFC career, but regardless of how he wins, I think he wins with grit. I think he wins down the stretch. I think it's not an easy fight. And I think Nate Landwehr outlasts Doo-Ho Choi. Of course, Nate has to worry about the danger on the Doo-Ho Choi side. Nate has been knocked out twice inside the octagon against Herbert Burns with a knee and against Julian Erosa with a flying knee. And he was also knocked down against Dan Ige, but that doesn't really matter, even though that was at the end of round 1. But he's definitely got to watch out here because Doo-Ho Choi is a finisher. On paper, he's a potent finisher. He's got 12 knockouts in his 15 wins. The thing of it is, he had a long layoff, 4 years out doing his military service in South Korea, and some injuries and things preceding that with losses. Got his face smashed by Jeremy Stevens. And my point I'm trying to make here is, aside from that dicey finish with that weird punch in the face against Bill Algeo in his last fight, Duo Choi hasn't put anybody away since 2016. So even though he's got a ton of finishes, they all take place 10 years ago and even before that. So there's that. But I still trust that he's a dangerous guy. I don't think his record can lie that much. And I think at 33, if anything, he's probably gained some extra pop, some muscle behind his punches. And I do think Nate has to worry. Nate has to worry early about getting caught cold. But after that, once they settle into a fight where everybody's tired and everybody's exerted and exhausted, that's where Nate Landwehr comes alive and all of his traits hit the surface. And I think in a dogfight, I got to take Nate Landwehr. You know, Duo Choi, he's been beaten 4 times. He was knocked out twice against Charles Jourdain and Jeremy Stevens. Again, Jeremy really smashed his face in. But those are his 2 major losses. And then the other one before that was a war against Cub Swanson, which is in the UFC Hall of Fame from UFC 206 back in 2016. They gave such a war. And even though Cub was really the star of that fight, Duo Choi definitely earned his place in the Hall of Fame. And then he's got another loss 14 years ago by split decision. May as well have never fucking happened. But even these losses may as well have not happened, considering they're all over 5 years ago at this point. But I'm still picking Nate Landwehr because I think Nate is smack dab in the middle of his fighting prime. He's creeping up there. He's 36 years old, but he still looked phenomenal in the UFC. And even before the UFC, fighting over in Russia and whatever, he took on a lot of tough guys and outlasted just about every one of them. So if he doesn't get put away early, I think Nate Landwehr definitely wins this fight, and that's my prediction. Nate Landwehr by round 3 TKO, I think I said. Yeah, either way, he wins with the grit. And as for the bet, I haven't bet on him, not yet anyway. I'll wait till everything's available and see if there's something worth playing. Definitely throw some sprinkles on the round 3 grit plays and all that. But with this money line staring at me right now, and a pretty tight money line, I haven't bet on Nate because I'm scared. Up next, we have Bryce Mitchell versus Kron Gracie in another one of these. That's right. I'm picking Bryce Mitchell to win. I've got him winning by decision. And I will look for some sort of way to cover that prediction with a bet. But it's not going to be through the money line of Bryce Mitchell, which right now is minus 750. Go fuck yourself. However, on the flip side, Kron Gracie being plus 525, that's enticing. And I just think stylistically, his chances are better than that. Because Bryce Mitchell, even though he's a much better fighter altogether and a much better striker, and even though he knows he's only got one fucking job to do here in this matchup, he is still a grappler, first and foremost. And that means he does have grappling tendencies. Even I don't know what the fuck I meant by that. Your guess is as good as mine. I don't know. Whatever. If he gets clipped with a punch, he'll shoot for a takedown. There you go. But still, he is a grappler first and foremost, and Kron Gracie is a better grappler first and foremost. He is a pure grappler, essentially. Kron can make some things work for him on the feet, but he is very limited. He is not a sharp striker at all. He's just got some things on his side. Reckless abandon, of course, because he's feared so much on the mat. And he's got some tricky timing with some good counters. But in a pure kickboxing bout, if he's not able to get the fight to the ground, he's fucked against anybody in the UFC, even Bryce Mitchell. Bryce Mitchell is not near the striker that Cub Swanson or Charles Jourdain is. But Bryce Mitchell is still way better than Kron Gracie. And if he keeps this fight standing, Bryce Mitchell strikes better and moves better, and he's going to beat up Kron Gracie. I still don't think he'll get a finish. Again, he's going to have to try to keep his distance while he's out striking Kron Gracie and keep himself safe. And Kron Gracie stood up to better and more dangerous guys for 15 minutes. Bryce Mitchell's a totally different fighter, and he's pretty tricky himself. We've seen him put together some nice striking, but I still think Kron would survive, unless he's completely fallen apart. But the one guy who's been knocked unconscious is Bryce Mitchell. I really don't think he's going to get knocked out here, although it'd be fucking amazing if he did. But he was knocked out badly against Josh Emmett pretty recently, too. So there is that. If this was against anybody else, I'd be harping on that. But here, I'm paying more attention to his other losses, being choked out by Brad Katona and Ilya Topuria. Much more forceful submission there, but still, a guy who's been tapped twice in front of me. I do think Kron Gracie is certainly in the realm of tapping anybody, probably in any fucking weight class, and certainly Bryce Mitchell. So if he just gets close enough to Bryce or anybody, all he has to do is tie up with you. That's how he strangled Caceres. He got him with a rear naked choke. What else? That's how everybody gets Caceres. But he didn't take him down. He just clinched up with him and then started crawling around, rotating like a koala bear, doing real Gracie shit. And it's not like this hasn't worked before. He's been tested in MMA. He's gotten solid wins over Hideo Takoro and Tatsuya Kawajiri, former UFC fighter and Pride legend. And it's definitely something that he's got still in this matchup or any other matchup. He's got those same advantages. But he's been figured out. The blueprint's been laid out. He's looked horrible in defeat. And that is the prediction, by the way. I think if he loses, it's another embarrassing loss. I see no reason why his next loss won't look like his previous two, where he is just totally neutralized and trying his best not to be the butt-scooting Brazilian jiu-jitsu guy, but he's out of options. Bryce isn't quite as scary as those other guys. And again, he's got his own doubts to worry about and whatever. But Kron Gracie, I don't think, can take over any fight on the feet. I think the only thing he's got for him is a one-punch knockout, some tricky shot or whatever. But he's not going to be winning kickboxing battles. It's all about striking his way into a takedown or a tie-up, a clinch, where he can start doing some Mackenzie Dern shit, which, he's definitely more experienced and more savvy than Mackenzie Dern. But they're both jiu-jitsu fighters. And that's what he's going to do. Try to tie up with Bryce Mitchell and start crawling around on him. I will wait to see the prop bets, see if anything's worth it. And I do feel like I'll just end up playing the Kron Gracie money line instead of submission. And really submission in round one, I think, would be much more likely. That'd be what I'd be inclined to bet on, I believe. And that would be juicier odds, perhaps. But the prediction is Bryce Mitchell wins by decision. I think Bryce, he is a good grappler. I'm not saying he can handle Gracie, but I'm saying he can handle himself well. And if he gets taken down with a shorter period of time or whatever, Bryce is well equipped to survive. And Bryce is the better striker. There, Gracie's got to worry about surviving. And even though Bryce isn't exactly Mr. Knockout, I think he lights Gracie up and only accelerates as the fight goes on. So Bryce wins by decision is the prediction. And the bets will go every which fucking way. Did I just waste 6 minutes saying the same shit over and over? I think I did. All right. Next up, we have Ciryl Gane versus Alexander Volkov. My prediction for this fight is Ciryl Gane wins by decision. But I'm not as confident as I would be in that prediction because this fight is only 3 rounds. These guys fought for 5 rounds a few years ago, and Gane, on paper anyway, shut out Volkov largely. Volkov was still competitive, but just kind of a step behind, really. But I still think with 3 rounds and Volkov putting his foot on the gas a little more, which he'll be able to because it's only 3 rounds, I think he's going to be much more competitive here. And with some better decision making, he can definitely win this fight. Once the kicking range was figured out, I did think Cyril Gahn did prove to be a very sophisticated striker and just a little too much for Volkov. Mixing things up, but also he's big, strong, and athletic. And he was really managing that range very well against Volkov. And look, Volkov was a step behind throughout that fight. He had moments where he made things happen a little bit down the stretch, but it was not really all that much that came out of it. Again, he never won any round. The closest he came was round one, in my opinion. But after that, he was just largely a step behind. And here he's got to know he can't let himself get in that same spot. He's got to take more risks, maybe try some different tactics, or just really go with what was working for him in the first fight. But he's got more liberty to put his foot on the gas here because it's only 3 rounds, and I think he could make this interesting. But I'm still picking Gahn because Gahn proved to be able to handle Alexander Volkov like I think very few fighters could, dancing around at that range, but staying just a step ahead of Volkov, a step outside his range and a little bit faster. And I thought Gahn was putting together the much better and more sophisticated striking and getting the better of Volkov. I do think, of course, he's still got that spring in his step, and I'm sure he's just as strong, and he can make that shit happen. But also on the inside, if things are going wrong for him, I think Cyril Gahn is stronger on the inside, and he could get the better of Volkov in the clinch and on the ground. Not that he wants to go on the ground. I mean, he was out wrestled by Ngannou and strangled by Jones like it was nothing. And I am the dumbass who picked Cyril Gahn to defeat John Jones as well. But still, I think here he's got a clear path to victory because he laid it out himself a few years ago. And my prediction is he utilizes enough of that and whatever else he's got to do, and he scratches and claws to a decision over Volkov. I will see if that's something to bet on, but I feel like I might be going with Volkov at some plus points. Volkov's got a nice wide money line, and I expect him to lose a decision here. But I do expect him to stand tall, and I do expect him to give more trouble to Cyril Gahn with both his natural physical traits, but also him putting the foot on the gas a little bit more here and trying to correct some mistakes. So maybe I'll look into the plus points for Volkov. But as of now, I'm staying away from it, and the prediction is Gahn wins by decision again. Next up in the co-main event, we have Shavkat Rakhmonov taking on Ian Garry in a 5-round non-interim title fight. My prediction for this fight is Ian Garry wins by decision. And I've certainly bet on him at what's now plus 295. I think the odds are way off, but that's not what I'm saying here. He could be a 5-1 underdog. I'm picking him to win. And it's not because I don't have a lot of faith in Shavkat Rakhmonov or because I've got any real doubt in him. It's just because I have faith in Ian Garry. I think his style can give Shavkat a lot of trouble. I thought the same thing about Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, to be honest. But still, I do think Ian Garry is a very good fighter. He's a more difficult athlete, I think, to handle these days than Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. And I think he's going to give Shavkat Rakhmonov a lot of trouble on the feet. I have seen them sparring, and I've heard the comments. I know his teammate, Shavkat's teammate Adalayev, said that Ian Garry got tapped out twice in training. Shavkat got him with a ninja choke and some other shit. And I totally believe him. And I think I believe Brendan Allen when he tells me that Ian Garry was knocked out by somebody in training as well. But still, nobody's been able to beat Ian Garry in a fight. And even if he's been knocked out here or choked out here, there's no reason to think anything is a major hole in his game until we see it in a fight. And on the flip side, what we see on the upside is him being an excellent rangy striker, Ian Garry, who's dug deep when he's needed to, who's survived every dicey moment he's had to, and who's fought with some strange foreign tactics when he's needed to. Not that I expect that here in this matchup. Maybe against MVP it works. But here he's going to have to keep himself away from Shavkat Rakhmonov. Keep himself away from the clinch, which is where Shavkat hits his best takedowns. And that was the problem with Wonderboy. Wonderboy, I thought, had an advantage there because he was more susceptible to leg attacks, double legs and single legs, with the guys that took him down. And that's not exactly Shavkat's thing. But Shavkat still forced his way inside and was the strong gorilla inside and was able to do his thing. But I think Garry is going to be a little bit stronger than Wonderboy, a little bit more difficult to catch in the first place. And even though he's been rocked, and I'm sure Shavkat's had plenty of moments with him in their little sparring sessions and whatever, I still think Garry puts up the better points in the small moments. And that's the prediction here. I also have to mention Shavkat Rakhmonov. I've seen his near-death experience against the guy Adolov in whatever organization that was. But he was clipped with a big overhand right, kind of did some funky collapse on the ground, and then got mounted and pounded for a few minutes. And Shavkat pulled through when he needed to, dug deep, and a few minutes into round 3, he was the one getting a ground and pound finish. So he's passed every test he's needed to as well. But the point is, yeah, there's vulnerabilities and speculation with both guys, but this is a fight between two undefeated fighters, two guys that are already championship contenders, especially Shavkat, of course. And I think there's no real reason to base my prediction on doubt with anybody. I'm going with faith, and I've got a little bit more faith in Garry. And I think Garry knows, especially from having felt the ninja chokes and the rest of it, he's got to keep himself away from Shavkat and fight in the area where he's got the advantage. And that's at range where movement is more of a thing. And that's his thing. Garry by decision is the pick. I've bet on him already. And I have to wait for the props to see where I'm going to bet the rest of my Garry money. But I do think it's tough to trust anything. Again, I've never seen these guys lose. But decision is more likely for Garry. Even though I just talked about a fucking near-death experience or whatever the fuck I just said. But yeah, Garry by decision is the pick. And I am betting on Garry. And maybe Shavkat by submission. Remains to be seen, right? Next up in the main event of the evening, we have Kai Asakura making his UFC debut, challenging Alexandre Pantoja for his flyweight championship. My prediction for this fight is Pantoja wins, and I've got him winning by decision. And the basis for the prediction is that Pantoja is incredibly durable, first of all. And I trust him to survive even against the danger of Kai Asakura, which he's got a lot of danger on his side. And on top of that, I think Alexandre Pantoja is the more willing and better grappler here. I don't think he can go through Kai Asakura, not easily anyway. Kai's never been submitted, but Pantoja's pretty damn good down there. I think if he slowed Kai down enough, down the stretch, anything's possible. But typically, Pantoja's getting a finish like that early in the first round or two. And I think here he's going to be trying to make the most of his takedowns by securing control of Kai Asakura. I envision his victory looking somewhat like Kai Asakura's last loss to Hiromasa Ojakobu, whatever. Little Sakuraba. That's what his nickname was on The Ultimate Fighter in season 25, I believe, when he beat Alexandre Pantoja in the semifinals by decision. How's that for irony? Maybe not. I don't know. But that's the last guy to beat Kai Asakura. I should mention Kai Asakura's got 4 losses. His record is 21-4. I've never broken him down. I may as well cover this shit. He has finished 16 of his 21 wins, 13 by knockout, 3 by submission, and of course he's got 5 decisions. His 4 losses include 3 by knockout and 1 by decision. And that decision is to Hiromasa. And that's a few years ago, and that's his last loss. But whether it's Hiromasa or any of the three guys who knocked him out, Kai Asakura has beaten all of them. All four guys, Kai Asakura is 1-1 versus those guys. He was knocked out by Manel Kopp in round 2, and he beat Manel Kopp by split decision. He exchanged knockouts with Kyoji Horiguchi, caught him cold early, and then got caught cold himself, and had his legs chopped down before that. And he was knocked out in round 3 against his Korean journeyman in his first loss, Jae-hoon Moon. This is precisely my kind of fighter. A guy with a 50-50 record, a dog shit record, but he's deceptively durable, and with the right kind of matchup, he can give you a lot of trouble. And that's what this guy is. He's like the Korean Artem Lobov or something. And he was able to knock out Kai Asakura in round 3. In the rematch, Kai Asakura was able to beat him by decision. And it was an exhausting fight. But still, here, I think he's going to lose this one. I think Pantoja, he's maybe not the most dangerous guy on the feet, but the power's shown up when he's needed it to. And I think he could catch Kai Asakura like those other guys have. But I think his main path to victory lies in the last loss of Kai Asakura's, and that's against Hiramasa, where takedowns were the difference. Not that the whole fight was standing. He had got him down a few times, once early and a little bit in the end, but really the takedowns slowed down the striking of Kai Asakura. So I think if Pantoja is able to take him down, it's going to work wonders for Pantoja and maybe create some openings for Pantoja to test that chin. As dangerous as Kai Asakura is, the durability of Pantoja has me thinking if anybody's getting knocked out, it's Kai Asakura. And Pantoja would get his hand raised there. So Pantoja is who I've got winning this fight. He's already stood up to the danger of Davison Figueiredo, Manel Kopp, and Brandon Moreno, and whoever. He's tough as all fuck. He's definitely the more versatile guy between these two, which is my way of saying he's the better grappler. And he's been fighting like a real champion, scratching and clawing for victories. That Steve Erceg fight was razor thin, yes, but Pantoja did win it in the end. Whether it was a lapse on Steve Erceg's part or not, Pantoja was the last man standing there. And of course, I don't have to go back and revisit his fights against Brandon Royval and Brandon Moreno, but he's definitely the king of the division now. And I think he's going to have more than one way to figure out Kai Asakura, to slow him down, and to win this fight. And I'm taking Pantoja to win. I've got him to winning by decision. I can say this, though, because I trust the durability so much of Pantoja, I think Kai Asakura's primary path to victory, if not only path, is by decision. And because I can shave his path to victory down to one thing, I will bet on Kai Asakura winning by decision, unless the odds are way off. But I plan to anyway. But again, Pantoja's got a few more options. I think decision is most likely. But if you look to the losses, Kai Asakura typically loses by knockout. And if you look to the victories, Pantoja's got 10 strangulations as a pro. So I think Pantoja winning is the safest play. And that's why I haven't played him heavily, but I have played his money line. Again, I'm going to wait till everything arrives, all the props. I can see which way is the best way to go. But I am picking Pantoja. Like, share, subscribe, all that horse shit, and check out my other videos.